Very good, sir. Okay.
Okay, you'll let me know when you're ready for the first question.
I'm ready for the first question.
Okay, page 4-7 of the manual.
Yes, sir.
You look down at the two diagrams referring to radiation patterns. The one on the left, and by the way, I don't pretend to understand half of this, but
I'll explain it to you. It's very simple. It's very simple.
Well, the diagram on the left claims that you're looking as if you were looking down at the top of the from the top down on the antenna.
From space.
The one on the right says you're looking down like from the side of the
correct. Correct.
But they both look exactly the same in terms of the patterns that's emanating from them. Well,
for that antenna. For that antenna.
Yeah.
So you're going to learn this evening there are theoretically perfect antennas, and those are called isotropic antennas. Okay?
Yeah.
They don't exist in reality. They are just mathematically perfect. So the point that they're trying to make here is that an antenna has a radiation pattern in actually 3 axes. So you have to look at it from, if you were from looking straight down from space, then you look at it from one side, and then also, which the book doesn't really go into, how far those lobes actually go. Can everybody see my screen? So I hope so. I am sharing it.
I can.
So, all right, good. I'm going to just try to get there, and I'll show you what I mean. We're getting there. We're getting there.
Also, in case you forgot it, you asked that battery question.
Yeah, no, I didn't forget. I want everybody to show up. Okay, so here they allude to this fact, isotropic antenna. Okay, and this is a theoretically perfect antenna. They do not exist in reality. Okay, so I guess this is what you're referring to?
Yes.
Right? Okay, yeah. So if you were to look down from space, so where, 5 miles up above your antenna, this is the pattern that it would radiate, okay? Looking down from outer space.
Gotcha.
So this has a forward, we call these lobes, right? So this would radiate in this pattern. The idea here is that if you notice that the way it's pointed, okay, in the opposite direction, the antenna isn't working. All right? So you got to be careful with how the antenna radiates. You can put up, a $2,000 antenna, and we call them beams, and if it's very directional, signals going opposite you won't work. Okay? That's what they're trying to show here. This is from the side. Okay? So if this is ground level.
The side of what?
The side of the antenna. Same antenna we put up. Okay?
And it's still, the antenna's still pointing up, but you're looking at it from the side.
Yeah, let me draw it in for you. So the antenna, this is our antenna. So the antenna is going to look like, we're looking down at the antenna. Okay? This is a Yagi antenna. That model that you're looking at is called a Yagi. It's named after Dr. Yagi, who invented this antenna. Okay? So the antenna is going this way.
Okay.
Okay? And the elements are this way. So what they're trying to tell you is, on this type of directional antenna, okay, anything behind you, it doesn't matter if the station's right here, right behind you, it won't work. Okay? So that's the way that looks. In this view, the antenna is this way. Okay? Actually, it's hard to see. So you're looking at the side view of the antenna, and here's the pole. Okay, so I can't draw the elements because you're looking at it from the side. This is how this antenna would radiate. So it would radiate this way, it would radiate. So this radiation pattern here is from this element here. This radiation pattern going up are from these elements here. And then this radiation pattern here would be from here. And this is altitude, so how it attacks the sky. Does that make sense?
More than it did before. There
Okay.
was a reference here, though. I don't know exactly where it is. Where it fused the two. I think it refers to
Huh?
the mythical antenna that you talked about before.
Isotropic.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
but it talks about it going in every direction. They didn't use that phrase, but
Yeah, so that's a dipole, radiates differently, and an omnidirectional antenna will radiate in in a 360-degree pattern.
didn't we just say the opposite a minute ago?
Yeah, because it's two different antennas. So a omnidirectional antenna will radiate this way. This
Okay.
antenna design that you're looking at is a Yagi. It's this type of antenna called a
Yeah.
Yagi. Different types of antennas,
Right.
right? And which one is the right one for you depends on what you want to do. This has a lot of penetrating power in the direction that you point it, but bad part is it doesn't do anything for you behind you, okay? As opposed to an omnidirectional antenna, and an omnidirectional antenna will radiate. So an omnidirectional antenna would look like this. It radiates in 360 degrees, but you don't get much distance out of it. Is that
That's the pattern it creates, or that's what the actual
correct?
antenna looks like?
No, the antenna looks like a pole, just like a pole. This is the
Oh,
ground,
okay.
looks like a pole, all right? And it radiates around itself 360 degrees, okay? So the radiation pattern of an omnidirectional antenna would look like this. So it's pretty round, almost perfectly round, okay? The problem is you don't get much distance.
Okay.
So we call these beams or Yagi antennas. So after a while, what we want is more distance out of our antennas, so we put up these Yagis. So they penetrate much further in one direction, and the giveaway, the bad part is they don't radiate in the opposite direction.
So do you use more than one antenna?
So here's the requirement in my house. In my
Okay.
house is you can't see the antenna, because if
Yeah.
you do, my wife will kill
Yeah. You've
not only
explained
me,
that.
but whoever finds the antenna, right?
You've explained that.
So I have to use stealth. So I use a dipole antenna, which we'll talk about this evening, okay?
Okay.
A modified dipole. So and in the world of antennas, okay, just so you're aware, you could spend the rest of your life and then some and start again and still talk about antennas. So antennas is a subject in and of itself. It happens to be my favorite subject, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of textbooks written on antennas. It's the most complicated part of amateur radio if you get into it, okay? So there's no perfect antenna. It depends on what you want to do. So I own several antennas, but they're not always up in my house. So I do own a Yagi when I want to talk to the International Space Station. I do have an omnidirectional for 2 meters, and I have a dipole, which looks like this. Its radiation pattern looks like, you probably don't have one here. Yeah, so this is what a dipole radiation pattern looks like. And this is what I have, all right? And a dipole is the simplest of all antennas. It's just a piece of wire like this, 2 pieces of wire. They go to your radio, okay? And that's it. That's as hard as it gets, okay? Called a dipole. It's the most efficient of all antennas, okay? So if the antenna is now, since it's only 2 pieces of wire, it's stretched this way and it's stretched this way. And my radio's sitting right here. I'm sitting right underneath it here, okay? I hope everybody can see that. And this is the radiation pattern that it uses. Okay, you'll notice that there are some dead spots. These guys are dead. All right, so that's another type of antenna. So there's literally an infinite number of antennas that you can play with, and that's part of the fun of it. Okay, did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Very well,
okay?
Joe. Thank you.
Yeah,
Doing good.
great.
Fine, thank you.
Okay, listen, I have to sincerely apologize. In all the years I've been doing this, that's the first time I ever had to cancel a class because I had to work. I do a lot of medical stuff, and they're changing the way that, you know, when you go to the doctor bills you. It's part of Obamacare, and it was a big, gigantic deal, and I got stuck, and there was nothing I could do. So I do apologize. So we'll make up the class. I want to answer some questions that I've been getting. So let's talk about getting the answers to some questions before we start the class. Number one is, let's see here. I had a question on somebody didn't understand frequency because it's used in multiple ways. So we have a signal, right? And I told you that a signal normally, you have a carrier here, right? So this is the carrier, and then we have our modulation, whether it's CW or phone or whatever it is, lives here, right? And then, so this whole signal in one shot, okay, we call that a frequency. So we pick 146.850. We want to transmit on that frequency. We call that transmitting on that one frequency. This happens to be FM, okay? So let's say 800, okay? So we call that a frequency. Now our modulation itself, okay, can come in various flavors, okay? So this is the whole carrier signal. Let's just focus on this little part, the modulation, okay? The modulation, if we lay it on its side, looks like this. And we can modulate, that's our voice. Let's say, for example, our voice. So our voice has a pattern. And we can modulate that signal. We can encode that signal electronically so it comes out the other end a couple of different ways. We can do it by frequency. So if I use a very low voice, the frequency would look like this, okay? And if I talk really, really high, the frequency would look like this, much closer together, okay? How far the waves are to each other and how many we compact is known as frequency. How many times do they frequent? How frequently do they occur within a given period of time? So that's known as frequency. Another way we can modulate or send our signal is through amplitude. So this is FM, frequency modulation, right? So we're varying how many of these things we put into a given space. Sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's a little. Frequency modulation. Another way to do it is if we do it this way, I'm exaggerating it, right? And the waves vary in height. Here, the height stays the same, okay? What we're modifying is how close together they are. Here, what we're modifying is they stay about the same distance from each other, and what we're changing is their height or their amplitude. That's AM, okay? Amplitude modulation. And this is how our voice carries. So if you go to your car and you select AM or FM, they're both radios. They both give you the signal, right? FM just sounds better than AM. But AM works, okay? There's still AM stations. So AM, you listen to news and speech, something that isn't super critical. FM, you use for music more often than not. It's clearer sounding. So frequency can occur when we describe the modulation as well as what frequency we're on to transmit and receive. That was a question I had. Okay? I hope that answers that question. Okay, I had another question. All right. If you don't understand this, let me know, okay? It says, Joe, I have some questions that fit in the discussion of antennas. I have a Yaeso VX6 that, aside from the squelch, has no filters that I can find. First, I find very little in the way of broadcast in my area, period. But when I do barely understand it, it's overstatic. Tuning does not seem to help. Okay, we're going to get into the antenna segment very shortly. I'm just going to finish up the rest of the chapters. So I told you first class, right? I'd rather have the world's crummiest radio and a great antenna than the world's best radio and a crummy antenna. So you can buy a $10,000 radio, and if you don't have a decent antenna, it's not going to work. The antennas that come with walkie-talkies or handy-talkies like Yaesu, not just Yaesu, all of them, it's a compromise at best, okay? It's the very best compromise that they can give you because they figure you're going to attach it and put it in your pocket or attach it to your belt or something like that. So the answer to this question is buy a mag mount antenna and hook up your radio to that. You will get a 20 dB gain, which we're going to learn about, just by hooking it up to an external antenna. If you change the antenna that comes with the handy-talkie and hook it up externally, you get a ton more power and everything else. There's 3 rules to antennas, okay? 3 rules. The golden rule for antennas, and they are altitude, altitude, and altitude, okay? The higher you go up, the crummier your antenna can be, and you can transmit really far away. The closer to sea level you are, the more efficient your antenna has to be. And we'll discuss how we measure efficiency. Okay, so that was another question. Did anybody else have any other question that I didn't get to answer relative to these chapters, please? No? Wow, I did a good job then. All right, cool. So I just want to finish up chapter 3, and then we'll move on to the next chapters. Okay? So I had somebody else email me today that they're a little frustrated they're not getting all of it. We have to have some kind of common textbook to discuss things. I don't agree most of the time with this ARRL textbook. I think they emphasize things that shouldn't be emphasized. They make things overly complicated, and it doesn't really stay with you. Why do I use it? For 2 reasons. Number 1, we have to have a common ground, so we have the commonality of the textbook. And number 2 is they're the ones who give you the test. So you know what? It's nice to have the point of view of the guy that's giving you the test, right? That's the reason. So again, I don't want you to get frustrated if you don't understand everything, because the textbooks are complicated, okay? And they're overly complicated. So that's why you come to the class, so that you don't get your feathers ruffled. Okay, so we were talking about basic radio components of the radio and what goes into radio circuits. Okay, so everybody knows that we have a transmit-receive switch that's on our microphone. You press it to transmit, you let go of it to receive. Oscillators and amplifiers. Oscillator just allows you to tune different frequencies, right? So when we go to our handy dandy ham radio deluxe, okay, we're on the radio here, and then I just hit this little bar here, which is like doing my tuning knob, adjusting my tuning knob. You notice the frequency changes here, okay? And the ability for me to do that, the device that allows me to do that, is an oscillator, okay? So it picks a frequency, it stays on there, and I can transmit and receive on that frequency, okay? All right, cool. Amplifiers. So an amplifier, as exactly as the name implies, amplifies the signal so I can hear it, okay? So this diagram is just to show you basically how a simple radio would work. This is a CW station, right? Morse code. Oscillator picks the frequency, okay? The driver is what drives that signal through the telegraph key so we can transmit and receive. It goes to an amplifier, so you hear the dot, 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 dots, and it allows it to send the dot, 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 dots, and it goes out to the antenna. That's all this means, okay? So don't stress over it. Okay, filters. Filters, and that's what the rest of this chapter talks about, is filters. It's just a better way of listening to the signal, okay? Because sometimes the signals can become kind of difficult to hear. So, hold on, I messed something up here. Okay, let's try this again. And I'll show you what filters do. Right. All right, cool. So we're going to pick 40 meters, okay? All right, this is a digital mode, and you can hear a lot of static in the background, okay? Now my filters happen to be here. This is where I control my radio. And I can turn them on and off here, and down here I can fine-tune them, okay? So what we're doing here, okay, is you'll notice you hear all that noise. I'm going to hit the noise reduction filter. See how much better that sounds than this? So it allows me to chase signals. Let's see if somebody's on 80 meters. Hold on a second. Let me tune it in. And we'll talk about tuning as well. All right, let's see if anybody's on 80 meters. All right, so this is CW, Morse code. If I turn it off, can you hear the difference?
Yes.
Yeah, so as the signals get further and further away, there's a whole bunch of different filters that we can apply. We can apply this signal processor, noise reduction, noise blanketing, to even do it further. We can further adjust it here. We can increase the noise reduction level, notch filters to try to isolate a signal. A lot of times, you'll get a thing called a pileup, especially during contest time, or especially for the ladies that are going to be ham radio operators, okay? So if you're a YL, which is short for young lady, and you're a ham radio operator, every man on the planet Earth will trip over themselves and kill anybody else that get to talk to you. That's just one of the privileges of being a YL, young lady on who's a ham. And in order to get past that, okay, or if you're doing a long distance call, let's say I wanted to do a QRP call to Japan, I have to penetrate through a lot of space and a lot of static and a lot of other signals. These filters are used to isolate the signal for you, both transmitting and receiving, okay? Mostly receiving, okay? So that you can isolate the signal and you can hear it clearer. All right, that's the purpose of the filters. So you can isolate a signal and hear it. All right, and what we use for that is, and they have filters for everything, okay? High pass filters, band pass filters, and low pass filters, notch filters, depends on what you want to do, okay? Don't stress over the filters. Just know that they exist, and when you get your radio, you can play with all these filters, and you'll get a feel for what they are. I just need you to know that they're there. So this whole big rigmarole, not important at this stage. Believe me, you'll get to play with the filters, okay? All right, modulators in a radio, that's what takes our voice, turns it into an electronic signal. We transmit that signal. On the other end, that person received the signal, and they convert it from an electrical signal to an actual voice. That's a demodulator. That's all a modulator is, okay? Mixer. A mixer, as it refers to amateur radio or television, actually, just combines signals together, okay? And what they do is they'll shift frequencies, they'll shift the signals back and forth, and the reason for that is just to clarify or clean up the signal. That's all a mixer does. A mixer is very, very closely related to a modulator, okay? Don't worry about anything else other than that, Okay? Don't confuse it with an audio mixer. This is just for frequencies. Okay? And it tries to get you the cleanest signal possible. All right, receivers, very simple. The phone that you spoke on today, okay? Direct conversion receiver. There's no way to clean up the signal. You get what you get, okay? Direct conversion. So there's no filtration, there's no modification, there's no noise reduction. What you see is what you get, okay? We call those direct conversion receivers. Your cell phone is nothing more than a radio. Okay, I need somebody to mute their phone. Thank you. So your cell phone is exactly a radio. Exactly. It's on a 900 megahertz frequency. You remember where it was on the band chart. It has an antenna. It has a modulator. Okay, but that's it. So you can't do anything else with it. Okay. When you get into radio like we're talking about here, amateur radio, we can modify the signal. We can use noise reduction, called DSP, digital signal processing. That's what that button was, that is NR, noise reduction. It's like Dolby, if everybody's familiar with Dolby stereo, right? So it's exactly the principle that it's on, all right? They also have another type of amateur radio, which I will demonstrate for you next week, called SDR, Software Defined Radio, okay? Uses a very, very simple radio that you can build out of a kit for less than $100, and your computer does the rest of the work. And it's very, very cool. You don't have to go searching for signals on a band. You can see them graphically. I'll demonstrate it to you. It's called SDR, Software Defined Radio, okay? And then we have the ever-popular super heterodyne receiver, okay? All that means, the big fancy word for it is, it takes a bunch of frequencies, sends it to a processor, which is called the intermediate frequency, cleans it up, okay? Rejects static, rejects whatever, distortion there is, and sends it over to you so you can hear it. That's all it means. That's all that super heterodyne means. Means that it has a processor inside, receives the raw signal from the air, cleans it up, and gives it to you. That's it. That's all you need to know. Okay? See, not so bad, right? Okay, selectivity and sensitivity. Now, Ken, you don't mind if I pick on you, right? So Ken has a beautiful Yaesu VX6 handy-talkie. Beautiful radio. I own the VX8, okay? Those are seriously expensive radios. So for a handy-talkie, they can easily cost $300, $400, $500, $600, $700. So I know that Gloria, hi Gloria, you there?
I'm here.
So Gloria, don't you want to know what's the difference between a $600 handy-talkie and a $28 Baofeng? Oh, come on, ask me. I know the answer. Ask me.
Yes, please tell me.
Okay, glad you asked that question, Gloria. So the difference between a $28 radio and a $280 radio is sensitivity, how well it receives the signal, okay, and selectivity, in that when you zone in on one frequency, it doesn't let the harmonics of that frequency interfere, and it doesn't let other spurious other signals that are around, invade that signal. End result, it sounds cleaner. Okay, that's the difference between a $28 Baofeng and a $280 or $380 Yaesu. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the Yaesu is better built. There's no comparison. But for 28 bucks, it's not a bad. The Baofeng is not a bad radio. Okay. So selectivity, sensitivity, that's the most important thing, because we can't talk to you if I can't hear you. Okay. And if you take two radios, if you take Ken's VX6 and compare it to the $28 Baofeng, his radio will always blow away the Baofeng. But the Baofeng isn't bad, right, for what it is. But, you know, if you're in the metro area, for example, like Long Island, where there's 1 million repeaters, I don't really care so much. If I lived out in the Midwest, where the repeaters are 50 miles away, I would be more worried about sensitivity. So I don't know that a Baofeng would work there. You know, because I keep getting asked, what kind of radio should I buy? And the answer I always give is, I need to buy a car. What kind of car should I buy? So the point is, you need more information from me to recommend a car for me. Do I need a truck? Do I need a van? Do I need a 4-door, 2-door? Same thing. So it depends on what you're going to use the radio for and where you live. Okay? Transverters. Transverters are a circuit that's inside the radio. That's, I call it the BS circuit. Okay? So the radio was designed for one set of frequencies, and you use this transverter, and it now operates on another set of frequencies. That's pretty cool. So if you buy an HT, okay, like the Baofeng or the Yaesu, they have transverters in them. They were really only designed for 2 meters, but they work on 70 centimeters. How do they do that? They have this transverter. I don't need you to know about it. I don't even need you to worry about it. I just want you to know that they exist, just because you know that they exist, okay? It's also used, they give you the example here, that you can buy a transverter to take 222 megahertz, and you can go on HF, and you can do, yeah, okay. So it's commonly used. It's a very inexpensive, very simple circuit, and it's most widely used on HTs, handy talkies, okay? That's it, chapter 3. Are we okay with everything?
Quick question.
Sure.
I can't find my notes on for each meter bandwidth that you talked about, what the range is on frequencies.
Okay. I will send it to you. I'll send it to everybody again. I'll send you the sheet. Yeah. But again, if we look at Ham Radio Deluxe, you'll see that if we pick one, okay, like 60 meters, it starts at 5.20 and it goes up to 545. So it goes from here.
Oh, if it's something you emailed, you don't have to email it again. I just thought I wrote it down. So
no, it's on the study sheet. Okay. So as long as we're here, we're going to be talking about this in a couple of seconds. Okay. So you might as well see it now.
Okay.
All right. If I go down to 160 meters, and I have a question, DJ. DJ, you there? DJ's playing hard to get. So I'm going to pick on Patrick. Hey, Patrick.
Hello.
Hey, Patrick. How are you?
Good. How y'all doing?
Good. Patrick, if I wanted to transmit at 160 meters, how long would the antenna have to be? Say 480. Say 480 feet, because that's what it is. Okay. Patrick, yes? No? I lost Patrick. He didn't light up. Okay, so the antenna would have to be about 500 feet. But anyway, you'll notice that when I hit 160 meters, and what I want you to focus on is this, okay? I want you to focus on this number. So I want you to focus there, and I want you to focus here, right? Okay. So if I'm at 160 meters, see the frequency? It's 1.904. If I go 80 meters, it goes up to 3.582. If I go to 40 meters, it goes to 7.022, and so forth and so on. All right? So the lower this number becomes, the higher this number becomes. Okay? Now, this is HF. And why didn't I put 2 meter and 70 centimeter on this list? Because I'm going to ask you questions, and I don't want you to be able to tell what frequency by this chart. But I could add 2 meter, 70 centimeter. So the higher I go up here, now this happens to be, let me pick on Linda. Hi, Linda.
Hi, I can talk tonight. Yay.
Oh, that's awesome. It's nice to hear your voice. So, Linda, I have a question. this frequency I'm on here, is this 2 meter or 70 centimeter?
70 off the top of my head.
No, that's not right though.
Okay.
It's 2 meter.
It's 2 meter. Okay.
Yeah, so 2 meter, 144 and higher. Now, Linda, same question. Now what band am I on, 2 meter or 70 centimeter?
Oh, shoot.
Now say 70. Now say 70.
I'll say 70.
Oh, that's a great answer. The point is, the higher, the lower the meters are, the higher this frequency becomes. It's important that you know that, okay? So, again, 70 centimeter, 2 meter, okay? I want you to absolutely know this. Next class, we're going to go through my entire radio, and you're going to tell me what we're on at random, okay? So, the frequency increases as the band number decreases, okay? Because they have different energy levels. You use these bands for different things, and that's the point that I'm trying to make, all right? So let's go to Chapter 4, and this will all make sense to you, okay? So antennas. I am the ultimate antenna geek, okay? 3 rules of antenna: altitude, altitude, and altitude. Okay, those are the 3 cardinal rules for it. Yeah. Three rules: altitude, altitude, and altitude. There's all sorts of different antennas, and I don't care what radio you have. If you have a great antenna, it's much better than having the world's best radio and a crummy antenna. Okay? So antennas is a subject that you can spend your life on, and there are people who do exactly that. They spend their lives working with antennas. How the antenna works is called propagation, okay? So how it reacts in the atmosphere. And different antennas react differently, as do different frequencies. So if I go back to here, this frequency is going to act differently on the planet Earth than if I transmit on this frequency. So the radio signal will be different, okay? So this is different than this. This is different than this, okay? They have different functionality, right? Okay, cool. All right, and then they give you this beautiful diagram. What this means is that radio signals like to travel line of sight, okay? So they like to travel in a specific direction like this, okay? What do they do when they hit a barrier, such as a building or a tree or something like that? Well, a couple of different things can happen, depending on the band that you're on, depending on where you are here, okay? So this is going to react differently than this. And that's part of the art of this, of radio, is knowing what radio frequency to use for what purpose, okay? Let's take 2 meter, okay? 146,850. It does a pretty good job. When it hits a barrier, okay, it won't penetrate that barrier very efficiently, but it'll try again, and sometimes it'll hit the tip and then fall over into this area, but you'll also get dead spots. So 2 meter gives you a pretty good distance, okay, but it doesn't penetrate things well. It doesn't penetrate buildings, for example, well, okay? And it will knife edge over, but you'll get dead spots, okay? So here on Long Island, for example, you can go 1 town over. So LImarc, second largest amateur radio club on the planet Earth. I happen to be president of that club. We have 6 repeaters. We are known as the big kids on Long Island, okay? Nobody messes with us. And yet I can go from my house, I can walk to the next town over, and they don't work. They don't work. But I can go 150 miles east and they'll work. But the next town over, they won't work, okay? And the reason for that is this reason. This is 2 meter. If I want to penetrate in a building, okay, I would use 70 centimeter. 70 centimeter, okay, will actually penetrate better inside the building than 2 meter does. But it doesn't have the range. So it's much shorter range than 2 meter does. Okay? Does that make sense? So
Yes.
depending on the frequency that you're on, it serves a specific purpose. Was there a question? No? Okay, cool. All right, cool. So the path that the signal takes can vary dramatically, okay? Sometimes the signal will bounce like this. Let's say we're on 2 meter. It'll bounce back, and then it'll bounce back again, and it bounces back, and it bounces back, okay, until it gets into another area. And that's known as multipath, okay? Remember when we sang row, row, row your boat? So it got a little confusing. We were out of phase. That's what happens sometimes. The solution for that is just to move a couple of inches with your walkie-talkie or a couple of feet, and you'll see it makes a huge difference in your reception. That is a question on the test.
Multi-phase?
Well, the fact that you should move in one direction or another. The question will be, you're on your HT, and all of a sudden the signal gets fuzzy. What do you do? Answer, move. You know, just move a couple of feet in either direction, and the signal will dramatically improve. It's the nature of radio waves, okay? Doesn't matter how expensive your radio is or not expensive. And that's because of multipathing, okay? Especially mobile radios, as in your car, they exhibit this phenomenon known as mobile flutter or picket fencing. Like that, and then all of a sudden it'll be crystal clear, okay? So that's a question on the test. It's on every test, so now you know the answer, okay? All right, cool. So 2 meter UHF, we call that ultra high frequency. I'm sorry, very high frequency. And 440, 70 centimeter, known as ultra high frequency, okay? And that's important that you know that because they refer to that in the manual, okay? And I think the next page, yeah, talks about our planet, okay? So the problem with UHF, 70 centimeter, it's not a problem, it just occurs. If this was a 70 centimeter, it loves to penetrate things. It likes to go through things. So if I'm transmitting on 70 centimeter, or let's say 447.535, the signal is going to go like this and leave the planet Earth and keep going forever, okay? Because that's what it tends to do. That's its characteristic, okay? But sometimes that's great, but I don't have any relatives on Saturn, okay? Not that I know of. My wife may have, but not me. So for my signal to go into space like that doesn't really satisfy my amateur radio needs. I would go to 2 meter. And 2 meter, okay, will behave in a different way. Remember, it doesn't like to penetrate things, okay? So what it'll do is it'll go up to here and then bounce off of here and then hit a radio station on the other side of the country, the other side of the state, the other side of the world. That's known as a hop or a skip. We reflect the signal off of the ionosphere, okay, and it comes back hundreds or thousands. It can even do 10,000. Not a problem. So on 2 meters, right, 146.850, I'm in New York on Long Island, right, so I'm way over here, okay? I've talked religiously to people in Nevada, okay, with just my walkie-talkie. And the reason for that is on 2 meters, it bounces off, and I get to speak to them. Sometimes it's called a skip in CB. Okay, I think they refer to it as a skip. Skywave propagation. So propagation is how the radio signal is going to behave. Everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, good. So that's no harder than that. Yes, sir.
Is it better with like clouds and such, or does it
Yeah.
not matter?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. It has to do with the layer of the atmosphere and what's happening. But certainly clouds have something to do with it as well. And you can bounce radio signals off of anything. You can bounce it off the moon. You can bounce it off meteorites, believe it or not. You can bounce it off the aurora borealis. I mean, there are people who in amateur radio that do nothing but work different propagations. How do you know what the propagation is? There are websites that you can go to, and it'll tell you by band if that band has good propagation. If it doesn't have good, let's say we're on 10 meters, or let's say I'm on 20 meters, I can look up today, and they'll say that the band is closed. Closed means it doesn't have very good propagation. There's nothing around for it to bounce off of. And yet 40 meters, because it's on a different frequency, the propagation may be good. And that changes almost hourly. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay. And it has to do with the atmospheric conditions. And then we have different layers. We have D, E, F1, and F2. Okay? And depending on when you want to transmit and where you want to transmit to, you would try to bounce off of these layers of the atmosphere. Okay? For example, F2 is perfect if you're transmitting at night. All right? F1 is when you want to transmit during the day. And then we have E layer and D layer, so forth and so on. Okay? And that changes all the time. And this is what we were discussing before. So again, if I was transmitting on 70 centimeters, right, my signal would go here. The frequency is very high, okay, and it doesn't refract off of the atmosphere, okay? And yet, you can take 2 meters, and it'll do this. That's why HF frequencies are so popular. HF being these guys here, right? So 10 meter, 12 meter, 15 meter, 17 meter, they're popular because we have a lot of them to choose from, and they travel further and bounce off of the atmosphere. That's the reason we have them. Okay, so depending on who we want to talk to and that kind of stuff. Okay. All right, so there are charts for this. There are websites for this, okay, that you can look at. And the highest frequency signal that can be reflected back to a point in Earth is known as the MUF, maximum usable frequency. This changes all the time, changes hourly, okay? And the lowest signal you can transmit out without it being sent out into space is called the lowest usable frequency, LUF, okay? And again, this is important if you want to talk to somebody very far away, okay? So if you're going to get into HF, which everybody does, and you want to talk to your, your nephew in England or whatever, you need to know this stuff because you'll know which bands are open and how to best get to them, okay? That's all that this means. No harder than this, okay? And here they talk about you can use meteor scatter propagation. You can bounce your signals off of anything. There are 1 million satellites you can bounce your signals off of as well. Okay, it doesn't have to be natural. It can be man-made. Okay. All right. Any questions? Okay. In the chapter on components, I left out. I kind of skimmed over impedance, and there was a reason for that. Okay. And we defined a circuit as a flow of electrons. Anything that resists that motion is called impedance. Okay? So it's like stepping on the brake on your car. Okay? Anything that will slow down that flow of electrons, we call that impedance. It could be resistance. Okay? So what slows down the flow of electrons that we have to deal with is called impedance. Okay? All right. So, antennas. Let's talk about antennas, my favorite. Okay? So, here we have two of the most common antennas that you can use. This is an omnidirectional antenna, okay? It's what I have on my car. I know it's crummy, but in your book it's clear. This is a magnetic mount antenna. It's a quarter wave 2-meter antenna. Who's going to tell me how big this antenna is? Quarter wave 2-meter. Ronald. How are you, Ronald?
Okay until now.
No. Piece of cake. Piece of cake. Here, let's figure it out together, right? 2 meters. So a full wave antenna at 2 meters.
2 meters times 3?
Right, you multiply by 3, right?
So
you always multiply by 3, because a meter is about 3 feet. 2 meters would be 6 feet, right?
Okay, right.
All right, good. That's for a full wave antenna. Half wave antenna is half of 6 feet. That would be 3 feet.
3 feet.
And half of that, again, because this is a quarter wave antenna, would be about,
1.5 feet.
yeah, that's exactly right, 18, 19. And again, we're approximating 18, 19 inches, right? So this sucker is about 18 or 19 inches high. It's magnetic. It goes in the top of my Hyundai, okay? And it works awesome. And for Ken, who's got the VX8 and can't hear anything, get one of these. You can buy them on Amazon, okay? Stick it someplace, okay? And plug your HT into this bad boy, and you'll get a huge performance increase, okay?
Your wife let you use it?
Yeah, next class, we're going to look out my window of where I'm talking from right now, and you'll see I have 2 of them sticking out my window. I just use a clamp, a regular clamp that I bought at Home Depot, and I stick the little mag mount on there, and it's invisible. She doesn't even know it's there, and it works great. Okay?
Cool.
So that's the way it works. Okay? This is a 2-meter 440 antenna, incredibly popular. I think you can pick them up on Amazon for about $18. Huge difference. Okay? This antenna, okay, is a different type of antenna. The radiation pattern of this antenna is omnidirectional, so it radiates equally in all directions. Okay? Any antenna is just the extension of the circuit. You have to have 2 parts. You have to have a positive and a negative on an antenna. Okay? So you need a positive and a negative. So the negative here is the actual, this part here is the car body. Okay? That's one side of the circuit. And the side that goes out to the universe, that's the other side. Okay? So every antenna has 2 parts, positive and negative. I told you that your cell phone is a radio, right? And it has an antenna built in, or else it couldn't communicate.
So the base of the mag mount antenna actually affects the reflection of the signal.
Absolutely.
So if you move it to, say, a corner of the,
Yep.
that will disrupt this, to some degree, the shape of the...
Not disrupt, but change. Yes, it'll change.
Okay.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you read the instructions for this mag mount antenna, they want you to measure your car out and put it exactly in the center of your car. Of course, I don't do that, okay? Because my wife would beat the crap out of me if I did that, okay? So mine is way back in the corner. For me, it doesn't make any difference. I'm so close to the repeaters here, you know, that it doesn't make a difference. But yes, where it's positioned makes a big difference. Yeah. Okay. Do I need a license to change the antenna? No. Somebody just asked me. Okay.
One more question.
Sure, of course.
The car again, you said that was the positive or the negative?
It varies. It doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
It doesn't matter. Hey, as long as we're discussing that, I'm going to like blow your mind here, right? So everything you've ever learned is wrong, okay? So I'm going to set you straight, okay? So here's a battery, okay? We have a positive and we have a negative side of the battery, okay? The way you were taught in school is that the current flows from positive to negative, right? Isn't that what you were taught?
Not in my school.
All right, good, because that's not the way it really happens, okay? Actually, it flows the other way. It flows from negative to positive, all right? And the reason that you were taught this way, if you were taught this way, is because they didn't know any better. But the formulas for electricity work the same whether it flows this way or that way, so they never bothered to change it. Okay? So a little trivia. Okay? All right, cool. This is another type of radio, another type of antenna. This happens to be called a Yagi antenna. And why is it called Yagi? Because it was invented by this guy called Dr. Yagi. And if I can find this picture here, let's see. That's what a Yagi looks like, okay? And that Yagi, that's actually a home-built antenna. You build it out of a measuring tape, one of those metal tapes, and it's directional. And do I have Dr.? No, I don't. All right, so much for Dr. Yagi. Let's see if I can. Oh, here he is. Here's Dr. That's what Dr. Yagi looked like. Actually, an incredibly brilliant guy. He won the Nobel Prize for physics, and he invented this Yagi antenna. It's what makes communication with the space stations and satellites and orbiters possible. It's this type of antenna here, okay? And it's a different design. Its radiation pattern is very directional. It focuses all of the energy in one way, okay, as opposed to this guy that's omnidirectional, okay? And that's what you can build
Is
to
that
talk
tuned
to
the same way?
Excuse me?
Is that tuned the same way, where the mass of the antenna has to equal the wavelength?
Basically, yes. Basically, yes. Yeah. And what's important to know here is we still have to connect our radio to this bad boy, so there's cable that goes to here and, let's say, ends here. This is known, wherever we connect the cable from our radio to the antenna is known as the driven element, okay? All of these other guys are known as parasitic elements. And that's a question on the test, driven element. Where we connect our antenna to is called the driven element, okay? And normally, the signal is transmitted 180 degrees from that driven element. And there's all sorts of variations, okay? I am 65 years old, and I've been in ham radio for at least 45 years, and must have built 100 million of these different antennas. I changed the length, I changed the thing. Very unique, you could, again, easily just spend your lifetime with just the antenna, okay? All right, cool. So, just two types of antenna. All right, cool. And then they talk about how the antenna works and polarization of the antenna, okay? And we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so we're going to learn this evening. I hope everybody has their calculator button, their calculator I asked you to buy handy.
Yep.
Because we're going to learn how to do dB tonight. There are people who have been into ham radio for 1 million years who don't understand gain, okay? Gain is rated in dB, okay? Decibels, dB. A lot of stuff is rated in decibels. Noise, for example, is rated in decibel, how much noise something makes. It's not a measurement of anything, okay? It's a ratio. It's how you expect it to do versus how you did. And that dB can be up or down, plus or minus, gain or loss, means the same thing, okay? So since you're in my class, I'm going to have you impress the most seasoned amateur radio operator, because you'll be able to figure out dB in just a few seconds, okay? Very, very simple. They give you this formula. You go, what the hell is this? You're in this formula right here, okay? So it uses logarithms. And logarithms, that word used to scare me when I was a kid. What is that all about? It's just shorthand. It's mathematical shorthand. So if everybody has their calculator ready, I am going to explain this to you, okay? You ready? Not afraid? All right, cool. So, dB, let me do this someplace else where it's a little easier to see. Let me do this. Go over here, make this. I changed the background so I could write on this stuff. Okay. So, dB is equal to, and we're talking about dB for power, how much power something puts out. Okay. It's 10 times the log of reference power versus measured power. Okay? They have these devices, they're called watt meters, where you can actually, it's actually a handheld meter. I'll show you one. And you can go out to your antenna and somebody hits transmit and it'll tell you how much power you're putting out, measured at the antenna. Very sophisticated ones are called bird meters, but it's really the same principle, right? So, I buy a radio, right? And Sean, I'm sorry, Sean, I'll just call you Sean. Sean, we buy a radio, right? And we buy a radio brand new, and we look in the manual, and the manual says that the radio puts out how much power? Pick a number. From 1 to 100.
10.
Okay, 10 is good. So, we have this beautiful radio, and it puts out 10 watts. How do I know? Because the manual says so. Okay? But I hook up my antenna, and when I hook up my antenna, Tom, the watt meter says I put out how much power? Anything more than 10, 20, 30, 50, give me a number.
40.
40. 40.
500.
I put 40. 40 works, okay? All right, cool. So here's what we're going to do. Everybody look at your calculator, turn it on. The first thing you want to do is figure out this section here, okay? So we put in 40. We hit the divide button, which is on the right-hand side, okay? And then we hit 10 and the equal sign. Everybody got that? And the answer should be, who's got an answer for me?
Should be 2.
It's 4, right? Yes?
Yeah, but don't you divide? I mean, don't you divide the denominator by the
10
numerator?
by, shouldn't it?
I'm sorry, say that again?
40?
Don't you divide the denominator by the numerator?
Yeah. And what did you get?
Well, I did it the way you told me to. I
Well,
got 4.
right. So you got 4. So
Yeah.
here's the example that they give you, right? So on here, we took, I'm referring to this example here, okay? And this is the way you need to do it. So they say a 5-watt signal turns into a 25-watt signal. So the measured power would have been 25, right? And it was a 5-watt radio, right? So what they did was they divided 25 into 5. And their answer that they got was 5. Okay, so I want you to do it this way. And the reason is because we're going to take the log of that number. Does that make sense?
Not to me.
No,
Okay.
not at all.
It
Okay.
doesn't to me either.
Yeah, I'm a little confused
All right.
myself.
No
'Cause
problem.
five-
No problem.
If
you
5
switch
over 20, go ahead.
All right, so I'm not going to treat this like a normal fraction, right?
Okay.
So what we're going to do is, this is the measured power. We said that we measured the power to be 40 watts. And the radio was at 10 watts. So what I want you to do is divide the measured power by the reference power.
So 40 divided by
invert
10
the
is
equation.
4.
Correct. 40 divided by 10 is what I want you to do.
Okay.
And you end up with 4.
Yes.
Okay? And then what you're going to do is up on the top, there's a button that says log. And you hit that button, and that gives you an answer of 0.602. Right? And then the formula is you have to also multiply by 10. So if you move the decimal point over to the right one, you'll get 6, and that's how many dB. So if you have a 10-watt radio, and at the antenna puts out 40 watts, you are up 6 dB. Okay? Let's take the one that they did here, right? Let's take this guy here. All right, this guy here. So we have our formula: 10 times the log of 10 times the log of, and we're computing this for power, the 10 times of the reference power over the measured power. Right? So if you do it their way, what they had is measured power was 25 watts, okay, and they started out with a 5-watt radio, and it's 10 times the log of that, okay. So we divide this guy into this guy, okay, and you get 5. And then if you hit the log button, you'll end up with something like 0.69 something, right?
6989. Yep.
Yeah, and you start to multiply by 10. Don't forget to multiply by 10. So if you multiply by 10, you end up with 69 something, which is rounded off to 7 dB. So here it's a 7 dB gain. Okay? You don't need to know this for the exam. Okay? I want you to know it, but you don't need to know it for the exam. The ones that you do need to know are in the study sheet. So you need to know 3 dB. What does that mean? 10 dB. What does that mean? Okay? But the point is, you now know how to figure out dBs for anything. Just remember that it's reference power over the measured power. We okay?
So why is it the opposite of what you would normally do? Like normally when you have...
You can do it. You can do the inverse if that makes it feel better. You can do the measured power over the reference power, if that makes it easier for you. That's the way I was taught. It'll work this way. If you want to keep normal, the way you would normally do it this way. I see your question, and I think I may have screwed you up here, and I didn't mean to. So do it this way. Measured power. Do it this way over reference power. How's that? Does that make it easier for you?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, absolutely you can do it this way. Okay. So I am sorry if I misled anybody. Let's do it that way. That makes it easier. Okay? All
It
right.
does come out to be the same number. It's just in a negative.
Yeah, it comes out to be the same. I learned it a different way. So and you're absolutely right. I should have taught it this way. This makes more sense to everybody who's not into logarithms. So I think I'm the only one who learned it the other way. So I apologize. So anyway, do it this way. 10 times the measured power over the reference power. The answer will come out the same. Okay? All right, cool. We okay with this? So if somebody comes up to you and says, I bought a radio and it's 20 dB, you can turn around and say, what does that mean? Because it doesn't mean anything. Okay? You have to have a reference power and you have to have a measured power. It's a ratio. It's an expression of how well you're doing. Okay? So for example, if we go to a specific type of antenna, okay, and let's say I build a Yagi antenna, and I want to talk to whatever, Chicago, okay? I love Chicago, okay? We have anybody here from Chicago? Close to Chicago?
I'm
No?
from Minneapolis.
Oh, okay. What's with
Not
the
close
wind?
enough, but yeah.
Yeah, what's with the wind? Holy cow. Anyway, so we have this Yagi antenna, and we're trying to reach Chicago, okay? And our Yagi we lend to our next door neighbor, and we put up a dipole antenna or another type of antenna. This antenna won't reach Chicago as efficiently as this Yagi will, okay? So what we talk about is that this dipole, as opposed to a Yagi antenna, will be down 30 dB. Okay, it's a measurement of how less efficient trying to reach Chicago a dipole is than a Yagi. That's what we use it for. Okay, we'll also talk about it in terms of radiation pattern. So antennas radiate in a specific pattern, and depending on what you want to do and not do, we talk about dB drop-off or dB gain. Okay? When you become amateur radio operators, okay, you will get a magazine called CQ magazine and other magazines, and they're filled with manufacturers and people trying to sell you antennas, and they will promise you 20 dB, 60 dB, you know, oh, you can talk to anybody, blah, 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 blah. Don't believe everything you read, okay? Because it's not really true, all right? And that's what they're referring to. So if we look at the radiation pattern, okay, of the antenna, it's important for you to see how dB, how we measure this radiation pattern in dB, okay? So 0 dB means we didn't gain anything, we didn't lose anything, okay? Negative dB, the antenna becomes less efficient. Positive dB, our radiation is becoming more efficient. How do we get more efficient radiation? You can use a device that there are none in this house called an amplifier, okay? And you can hook it up, and even if you end up with a 5-watt radio, you could have it crank out 2,000 watts if that's what you wanted to. Not legal, but you could, all right? You could build an efficient antenna. Your antenna could be higher up, okay? Long Island is like the world's biggest pancake. There isn't anything higher than 99 feet above sea level on Long Island that I know of, okay? So we build these towers, and we put our antennas on the top of a tower. I happen to be a pilot as well. So if I get in my airplane and I fly to 6,000 feet, okay, I have a 50 dB gain because of my altitude as opposed to somebody talking on the ground. Remember the 3 rules: altitude, altitude, and altitude, right? So that's how we measure the effectiveness of an antenna and of performance of the radio of itself, in and of itself, okay? You don't have to compute dB for your exam. You need to know 3 and 10. That's the most important, okay? Know that upside down and backwards. But now you know how dBs are computed. If you decide to stay with the class for the next couple of classes that I give for the general, on the general exam, there is a question on how to compute dB, and now you know how to do it.
Joe, what were you saying? I'm sorry, what were you saying about 3 and 10? Sorry.
Yeah, so you guys got the study sheet, right? The text study sheet? All right, so everything on here I want you to know upside down and backwards. I really do, or else you won't pass the exam. I guarantee it, all right? So somebody had asked me about what band is what frequencies. That's here, okay? And then here, I know it's here. They talk about dB, okay? So I need you to know this line right here, okay? And the question will be, a 3 dB gain is how much in power? 2. 6 dB, 4. 10 is 10.
Okay.
Okay? And I don't want you to compute it. I don't want you to even think about it. I want you to just know it. So that's going to be a 2-second question. They say 3 dB, you say double. Okay? If it's on this sheet that I gave you, it's on the exam.
Wow.
Okay?
Okay.
It's not as bad as it sounds. I promise. I promise it's not as bad as it sounds. So if you really understand these sheets that I gave you, I guarantee you, you'll not only pass, you'll ace the exam.
Okay.
And at 6 dB, I caught everything. I'm sorry, the 6 dB is
4.
Quadruple, 4 times the power. Right? So if we put an amplifier in, I have a 3-watt radio, and what comes out of the antenna is 12 watts, that's a 6 dB gain. Okay? But the question they'll ask you is very simple. They'll ask you, 3 dB changes the power, what? And the answer is double. They'll say 6 dB changes the power, what? Quadruple. And 10 dB changes the power, what? 10 times. That's as hard as it gets.
Okay.
Okay?
thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, cool. Yeah, so everything on these sheets, I don't want you to take them lightly. I really want you to know them. All right? I need you to know the signals that what we discussed in the schematics. Okay? I need you to know what RIT means, right? Fine tune. I need you to know what VFO means. So I really need you to know these sheets. Okay? All right, cool. All right, so that's how we talk about antennas. We talk about their azimuth and their elevation. So this pattern that we're looking at, so this is my backyard, okay? And we're looking up from about 10 miles in space, and we're looking down, okay? And here I am. I'm standing over here, okay? That's where I am, waving hello, hiya, okay? And this is my antenna. This happens to be a Yagi antenna. It looks like this, right? And it's situated this way. We're looking down at it, so this is what it looks like. And I'm here with my radio, and the signal is transmitting in one direction. Sometimes Yagis are called directional antennas. Sometimes they're called beam antennas, B-E-A-M, because they transmit and receive on a specific, like a highway, okay? And this is a generalized pattern. Actually, depending on the Yagi that you have, you can make this extremely narrow, okay, and really focus it, depending on the design of Yagi that you use, okay? If we were to look at it from the side, okay, so we're standing on the ground, and we're looking at my Yagi, and my Yagi's pointing in this direction generally. Actually, I lied to you. It is not pointing in that direction. It's pointing in this direction, okay? So you could see the pattern that it generates if we were looking at the ground, okay? So some of it goes to the left, some of it goes slightly to the right, and some of it goes straight up in the air. So this is altitude. Think of it as altitude, okay? There are antennas called NVIS antennas, near vertical incident, which go straight up. So the radiation pattern goes straight up into the atmosphere at a very slight angle, maybe 5 degrees or so. And that's in case you want to reach somebody very far away, and you're counting on the ionosphere to bounce this signal to someplace else. All right? So when we look at the radiation pattern, we look at the azimuth and the elevation of that antenna. All right? This is in case you get stuck on Gilligan's Island. You know how to get out, okay? So just that's why we learn this stuff. Okay, so we have our antennas, and we have our radio, and now we got to connect the two of them together, okay? And this is the different types of lead lines that you can have, okay? So this is the old, remember the old television antennas, the flat cable that we used to have from, I don't know that anybody here is old enough to, you sound like a young crowd. But in the old days, when we still had black and white TV, we used to run this 300 ohm twin lead cable, okay? It was flat. And that's what ran from our TV. This is in the days before cable TV. We used to run the antenna to our television, okay?
And there was
This is another type of lead line called ladder line or window line. Then you have coaxial cable, and they come in different flavors. The point here is there is a cable for every need. Why are there so many different cables? It depends on what you want to do, okay? The general rule of thumb, the bigger the pain in the butt it is to get a connector on this cable, the more efficient it is, okay? That's the general rule of thumb. And you can use, depending on if you have a high humidity issue where you live, you want double shielded or you want rigid hardline. Most people use 50 ohm coax cable, RG58, that's the most popular. But for the purists, for the guys who really need to get the most power without the least amount, with the least amount of loss, they'll switch to ladder line or something else, okay? So what I need you to know is that there's a bunch of different cables you can use. And I think they have somewhere down here, they have a table about, we'll get to it. They have a table about how much impedance, how much resistance each type of line gives you. Okay.
In the book, it made some mention of the first two types of cable that they can't be shielded. They can't be put through.
Yeah. I mean, yes, that's true. There's all sorts of, again, depends on what you're looking for. RG8, RG58 are the most commonly used. Okay. I want you to know that they exist. There's not a question on the test about it, so I just want you to understand we want 50 ohm cable, right? So Cablevision cable, that cable that TV runs on, that's normally 75 ohm. We don't use that. The impedance is too high. The resistance is too high. We use 50 ohm RG58. That's the most common. And it's not a question on the test. I just want you to know it. Okay? Any question? All right, cool. Let's talk about our arch enemy here, okay, called SWR. Before we do that, let's take a break, okay? I have a couple of questions. Inside, or maybe I didn't cover this with you, and I apologize. The most efficient antenna, or one of the most efficient antennas designs that there are, is a very simple piece of wire, 2 pieces of wire. Here's our radio, okay? And we just take 2 pieces of wire and we connect them to the radio, one on one side and one on the other. These are of equal length, okay? So this distance equals this distance, okay? This is known as a dipole antenna. Just a simple piece of wire. What kind of wire? Any kind of wire. Speaker wire, ignition wire, any kind of wire will work, okay? And the dipole, let's say we're on 2 meters, right? 2 meters, the antenna length would be, Terry, I'm sorry?
No, 6.
6 feet, about 6 feet, right? 6 feet. So if we're on a 2 meter, this side would be 3 feet, this side would be 3 feet, total length 6 feet, okay? Very, 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 very efficient antenna, okay? As I said earlier this evening when we were waiting for everybody to show up, they have these models, okay? They don't exist in reality. They only exist mathematically, and they're known as isotropic antennas. And they relate, and they talk about their signal loss, dBi, you will see, dBi. I stands for isotropic. So these are theoretically perfect antennas. They don't exist. Okay? So they don't exist. They just exist for mathematical modeling, right? Your cell phone, every cell phone ever made, period, end of sentence, has a dipole in it, okay? But it only has one side of the dipole, okay? So it only has one side of this inside the phone, right? Where is the other side, do you think?
Case.
I'm open to possible answers.
The
I have a
case.
hint.
The
No.
case.
Nope.
In the other person's
The
phone.
case is close. The case is close. The case is close. Remember that antenna, the magnetic mount, right, that we talked about? And it was hooked up to the car body? And I said, this is one side, the car body is the other one. So case is very close. you're the other side of the antenna.
Mm.
Okay? So when you hold the phone in your hand, okay, you're the other side of the dipole. Your whole body becomes side of the dipole. Okay, interesting fact. If you're in a fringe area and the phone is not, you don't have the phone in your hand, the signal strength will be less than if you hold it in your hand. You can try that, by the way. You can take your phone, put it down. Hopefully you're not too near a cell phone tower. Depends on where you are. And you'll see you get so many bars. Now pick it up and hold it in your hand. You'll see the number of bars increase. Okay? Why? Because you're the other half of the dipole.
Joe,
Okay.
why wouldn't the surface you put it down on be a dipole as well?
Because normally you would put the phone down on its back, and that's not what they're relying on. On the iPhone, for example, you'll see that there's a metal band around the side of the phone. They're hoping that you're going to hold it there. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, I think it was the iPhone 4, they forgot to connect that. And they had all sorts of issues, and they had to come out with a bumper and all sorts of stuff to address that problem. So the phones on the back are normally plastic, so if you put it down, it doesn't normally work well. Again, I'm generalizing, okay?
One more quick question. So
Sure,
if
of
you
course,
have,
as many as you want. As many as you want.
if you have a case, does that mean then you're not?
Yeah,
gonna
that'll
get it
impede. Yeah, that'll impede.
Ah.
Yeah, it will. Again, depending on where you are. In New York, we have a cell phone tower every 3.5 feet. No kidding. I can see my cell phone tower from here. Okay, and cell phones are very low wattage. You know, they're 250 milliwatts. What makes them work is there's so many cell phone towers. You don't realize it. Next time when you go out tomorrow, look up at the top of buildings and stuff. You'll see cell phone towers. And remember, altitude is important on any antenna, so cell phone towers are usually pretty high up. But from my house, I can see at least 3 cell phone antennas. Some of them are on buildings, some of them are on towers. That's what makes the whole system work. Okay, the phone itself is nothing. All right, so I forgot to cover that, so I wanted to cover that. Anyway, so how we connect our radio to the antenna, okay, there's a thing called SWR, standing wave ratio. That's what it stands for. Very, very, very important. And what I'm going to tell you is not 100% scientifically correct, but it's very close to being 100% correct. Okay? SWR, okay, is a ratio. Okay? And we say something is 1.2 to 1. Okay. What does that mean? That means for every 1.2 watts your radio is putting out, what's coming out of the antenna is 1 watt. This number is always 1. Always. Okay? Because we're measuring it to 1 watt. If I say that my radio has, or my setup has a 2.0 to 1 SWR, what it means is for every 2 watts that my radio is putting out, 1 watt is leaving the antenna. Okay? That's what SWR means. What causes this? Okay, what causes this is impedance. Okay, reactance, or different components. What kind of line? This is our antenna, right? Here's our radio. How do we connect this radio to our antenna? Okay, is the length correct? This length here, is it correct? Is it the right kind of cable? Do we have something else going on? Did water get in there? Okay, so why is this important? The closer you can get to 1-to-1, the better and more efficiently your transmitter will work. Okay? The better your radio will work. I have never, ever, nobody's ever seen a 1-to-1 SWR. It does not exist. There's no such thing. Okay? But that's where it ends. All right, so I have seen 1.1 to 1. I have seen that, and higher. And normally, when a radio gets higher than 2.0 to 1, okay, you got to be careful. Because what's happening is you're putting out twice as much power on the output of the radio, or the antenna's connected, that's leaving the radio. Something is not right. What happens is energy will start to dissipate in heat, in terms of heat. The radio heats up, the antenna heats up, which only makes things worse. And eventually you'll blow up your radio. Okay? So you want to be careful with the SWR. Most walkie-talkies, handy-talkies, are 1.4 to 1. How do you lower the SWR? You shorten the antenna, make the antenna longer, shorten the feed line cable, make it longer. You got to play with it, okay? There are antenna analyzers that will give you this information. I will show you one next class, okay? And I'll show you an SWR meter as well, okay? So you want to be careful with this SWR. So many things can affect the SWR, mostly antenna length, okay? And when we tune our antenna, make it shorter or make it longer, we can do that many different ways to achieve good SWR, okay? That's what we mean by tuning the antenna. We can do that physically, by physically cutting the wire or the antenna, or we can do it electronically with an antenna tuner. All right? And the whole idea is to get the SWR down to as close to 1 to 1 as possible.
Okay.
Any questions? That's not so bad, right? Okay, cool. So they talk about all this stuff here, open wire feed line. They talk about characteristic impedance, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So not something that you really need to concern yourself about, okay? Too much, just know what SWR is, okay? And they talk about here in this chapter, they say low SWR reduces losses in the feed line from the reflected pattern, blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. So, and they're right. Nothing in here is wrong. So as the SWR goes up, we're losing power. What happens to that power? It's actually reflected back into the radio. So it's like, you know, the system isn't letting all the power get out to the antenna, so some of it backs up into the radio, like a sewer line. Think of it that way. Eventually, when things back up in the sewer line, it blows up, and it's all over. Okay? So they talk about here what causes high SWR, antennas that are too short or too long, blah, 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 basically what I just told you. Okay? Erratic SWR is a loose connection. All right? So just know that it exists and that you have to address the issue. All right? Because you don't want to, not for the Baofungs that you're going to buy for 30 bucks, but when you spend $1,000 on a radio, you want to make sure that you don't blow it up with a high SWR. Okay? And here they talk about practical antenna systems. Okay, the simplest antenna, dipole. This is exactly what it looks like. This is what I have in my house. Okay? I have 3 dipoles in my house, and I defy you to find them. Okay? Because my wife would kill me. And my wife is an extra radio operator. So we're very careful about, we kind of live in a nice neighborhood, and my neighbors, even though he's a good friend of mine, wouldn't like it if I was cheesy with my antennas. So there's all different ways of hooking up a dipole. I have this running underneath the gutters of my house. Okay? I have another one in the backyard that's a very thin wire. It's like 14 gauge wire. It's invisible. It's practically invisible. And I won't tell you where the other ones are. Anyway, so dipoles, and they can be in full wave. You can make them half waves. You can make them quarter waves, antennas, blah, 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 blah. And this is what the radiation pattern looks like. They're pretty good. Actually, they're really, really good. Okay? Very simple. 2 pieces of wire. Make sure that they're the same length. Make sure that they're approximately the right length for the band you want to transmit on. You throw them up into a tree, one end in the tree, the other end up in the other tree, or wherever you can put it, and off you go. Okay? Much, much more efficient than the antenna that comes with your handy talkie. Okay? And there are connectors to make it all work. It's very simple. These connectors you can buy in Amazon. So this is what it looks like. And this is an isotropic, so it's a perfect dipole. Okay? Isotropic, mathematically perfect dipole. And you'll see that it has dead spots too, right? So here, and did I just, hold on. So this area here and this area here, not so much, okay? But the dipole transmits forward and back. These sections of the antenna are called lobes, okay? So we have a good front lobe, back lobe. This is looking from outer space. And then if we were sitting on the ground, this is what it would look like. Okay? Good general purpose antenna. Will I reach the International Space Station with this? No, I will not. Okay? Will I reach England? Yes. Okay? The problem is this tends to travel over the surface of the Earth and bouncing off of the ionosphere. Remember, I want to talk to the space station. I want something that's directional and is going to point straight up into space.
Can I ask a question, Joe?
Of course you can.
Boy, my crazy U-verse went out. I lost you guys for almost 45 minutes. I'm sorry to say. But, hey,
well,
on
I
the
recorded it. I'll send you
yeah.
the link as soon as it's posted.
Yeah, it'd be great. Hey, on the dipole, I see,
yeah.
0 degrees, 180 is where your signal strengths are, or what?
Uh-huh.
So in the case if you wanted to be kind of, left side, right side, you obviously have to have another dipole, or?
Yep. Exactly
okay.
correct. So
this
this sucker's pointing north. So let's say this is north. It's south, right?
Uh-huh.
So if you want to transmit east or west, you're out of luck.
Right.
Unless you put up another dipole, okay, that'll transmit this way. Yeah. That's the downside of dipoles.
With that being said, I guess other than being a big quad, can you run them in parallel?
That's an excellent question. The answer is yes. However, you have to take other things into consideration. You'll get some radiation interference between them.
Okay. So
they'll
way
cross-radiate. You're asking an extra level question. The answer is yes. So the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Yeah.
So, but safely, or the best way would be to have a switch and then go either north, south, and east, and west.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So if you guys go for your general, then the next one is extra, and the extra we talk about polar coordinates. Okay, so everything we're talking about here are rectangular coordinates. This happens to be polar coordinates, and the question was if you put up another dipole here, right? That sounds like a good idea. The answer is yes, that'll work, but the fact that you have two dipoles together, they'll cross-radiate, which decreases your overall performance. It's not what is recommended, and if you take the extra, you'll see mathematically why that occurs. It's better to go with something else. A rhombic antenna that looks like this, looks like a diamond, that's a better way of doing it. It has some of the characteristics of dipole, but it's a rhombic. So that's another way of doing it. Anyway, the answer is yes, you can do it, but it's not the most efficient way of handling it. Okay?
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course you can.
If you have a north-south antenna and an east-west, and they're not tied together, but one's antenna A, one's antenna B, you can switch back and forth. Do they cross-contaminate then?
Well, not cross-radiate. The answer is no, they will not.
Okay, thank you.
But they have to be completely off.
Yes.
Yeah. So as the other gentleman said with a switch, then you can do that. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, no problem. So dipoles are great for, I do a lot of backpacking. I'm a QRP guy, obviously, so I have my little 5 or 10 watt radio. I climb to the top of a mountain. Literally, it's just 2 pieces of Radio Shack cable, nothing fancy, on a very simple connector. I hook it up to the radio, and I have a slingshot with a fishing weight at the end of the wire, and I shoot one up in the tree, and I shoot one up 180 degrees opposite that. I can talk to anybody. That's what I do. That's
What
what
a
I do.
great idea.
No, it works great. I've spoken to China. I've spoken to Japan in the middle of the day. Okay, I'll go to Pennsylvania. You have some beautiful mountains in Pennsylvania, and I, get up. I don't climb up the mountain, by the way. I drive up the mountain. Anyway, I do climb a little bit, but it gets less and less every year. And I just slingshot, and I can talk to everybody. I'm talking to Paris, no problem, on 10 watts, okay? So remember altitude, and I use a simple dipole, and that works just fine, okay? Not to say that the other antennas don't have benefits, they do, but this is the simplest one, okay? All right, then they go to this whole thing, how long should your dipole be, and blah, 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 blah. It works out, if you do the math, it'll work out exactly the same way that I told you, right? Times 3, and then we're going to add a little bit because the meter isn't really 3 feet, it's 3.28 feet. Half of that, that's how long the antenna is. So they use this 468. Is it correct? Yes. Do you get the same answer? Approximately yes. And that's all you need. Okay. So this is a dipole, regular dipole. But of course, I'm fortunate. I live on a big lot for New York, okay? So I can, I say big lot, and I'm talking to some guy like in Maine or something. He goes, that's not a big lot. That's the size of my garbage can. So, for New York, I have 120 by 240 feet. That's unheard of in New York. That's incredibly large. So it's all relative, right? So I just can get a dipole in there. The house I had before this one was only on 60 by 100. Dipoles wouldn't fit. So another way of doing it is you can have a vertical antenna, okay, which is just this straight up and down, okay? But remember the car, right? This is only one half of the circuit. So what they have are these things called counterpoises or radials. And what they really are is just pieces of wire, okay? And you throw this piece of iron into the ground, and then at the base of it, you hook up these wires all over the place, okay? My wife would kill me if I did this, okay? And sometimes you need 30, 40, 50 radials to make the other half of the antenna. So that's not happening in my lifetime. Plus, I don't have the patience to put 40 or 50 radials in here. I'm tired of just painting them in, okay? But that's another type of antenna that you can have. Very efficient, okay? And if you have the space for it and you have the patience for it, you can do it, okay? So that's another type of antenna that you can use. Okay, cool. Sometimes they use this. They use a mesh system, okay? And they hook up the antenna to this plate. It's actually a plate, and the electrical image is that it's really a dipole. So obviously the dotted line doesn't exist, but this base plate here acts as the other half of the dipole. So the antenna that you saw, that mag mount that we looked at the beginning of the chapter, that's really a dipole. So one side is here, the car body is the other side of the dipole. Your cell phone, dipole. One side is the actual wire that's inside the cell phone, the other half is you. Okay? Any questions? We're good?
Good.
All right. Yeah. Good? All right, cool. All right, cool. So antennas, depending on how you situate them, okay, have a radiation pattern, okay, as we discussed. And sometimes the antennas are either horizontally or vertically polarized. This is the worst possible example that they could give you in this manual to discuss polarization. So we have our dipole here, right? Here's our dipole antenna. And then we have a vertical antenna with our radials sticking out that I'm not doing ever in my life, okay? This guy here. And by the way, if you get that magazine, they say, no radials required. Lie, okay? because it just doesn't work that way. You have to have two sides to the antenna. All right, here's our dipole. Here's the ground, right? Here's my radio, and I have a switch, so I don't interfere. Here's my switch. Here's my radio, right? And I have a feed line going to my switch, and the switch goes to this antenna, or it goes to this antenna. Okay. If I select antenna number 1, okay, the signal that it's emitting is called horizontally polarized. Okay, it's horizontal polarization. It's going to send out a signal that looks like this. Okay, if I hook it up to antenna number 2, okay, a vertical antenna, guess what it's called? Vertical polarization. So the signal is going to radiate this way. Yes.
When you're referring to some things, I don't know if it's just me, but I'm not seeing. I can see where the drawing, but I'm not sure which you're pointing to.
I'm sorry. Okay, so antenna number 1, can you see that with the red marker?
No.
You don't.
I can't. I don't see a red marker. Maybe it's.
How
just
about if
me.
I highlight it like this? Do you see it this way? If I highlight it?
No.
No?
I see green. I see green. I see the radio. I see the bipolar or the dipole. I see
Okay. Let's say, how about if I just use the pointer?
Now I do. Now I do.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So in antenna number 1, right where I'm pointing at the moment, okay, that's horizontally polarized, okay? So it's going to be perpendicular to the planet Earth. That wave that's going to go out is perpendicular to the planet Earth. That's the point. That's called horizontally polarized.
Wouldn't that be not perpendicular?
Why would it not be perpendicular?
Okay, no, that'd be
In
parallel.
the same plane. Yeah, I'm sorry. No, you're right. Parallel. I'm so sorry. Parallel. I've been working too hard. It's parallel to the surface of the Earth, okay? In a vertically polarized antenna, it's perpendicular to the Earth. It's at 90 degrees to the Earth. So the radiation pattern is going to be 90 degrees to the surface of the Earth. Either one is acceptable, okay? I just need you to know that the antennas, their polarization of the signal will be slightly different, all right? It doesn't cause a problem generally, only if you're a QRP person like myself, okay? And I'm using a horizontally polarized antenna. Since my signal is so weak, I'm more likely to be picked up by a station whose antenna is also horizontally polarized. I have a tougher time talking to antennas that are vertically polarized. Does that make sense? Because my signal is going to be out of phase 90 degrees to the receiving station. So the best performance I get as a QRP station, because my power is reduced, is if I'm using a horizontally polarized antenna, is talking to another station that has a horizontally polarized antenna. If a vertically polarized antenna, like antenna number 2, tries to pick me up, they're going to have a slightly tougher time. Okay?
And we'll learn eventually, when we have both antennas, we'll learn when you're supposed to use antenna 1 versus antenna 2?
Absolutely. When you get into the general course, okay, we spend more time with the antennas, and it depends on what you want to do.
And
it depends on.
I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
Can you have more than 2 antennas there?
Come to my house.
Okay.
I have about 25 of them. Yeah, because they do different things. Yeah,
I assume
absolutely.
so. Yeah.
Yeah. So the general rule of thumb is you can't have enough money, love, or antennas. Okay, that's the way it goes. All right. Yeah. Oh yeah. You can have a plethora of antennas. Okay. So that's how antennas work. Okay. And they talk about polarization. I wanted you to understand this polarization thing. And here in this particular page, they talk about vertical antennas and horizontals and all sorts of stuff, okay, that you can do. And each one of them has a function, okay? Here on this page, they talk about Yagis, okay? And remember, I call them Yagis or beam antennas. Okay, these are the most popular for the guy who wants to talk to, Japan on a regular basis, or Europe, or Africa, or China. Okay, this is what the DXer, we call them DX for long distance. That's what amateur radio operators, ham radio operators would use when they want to do DX. Okay, depends on what you want to do. Okay, if you want to do long distance, this is the antenna you get. Okay, if you want to get into Aries and you just want to talk on your repeater, no need for this. Absolutely no need. This is overkill. Okay, so again, it depends on where you live, if you have the space, and what you're trying to accomplish. Okay. All right, cool. And here they talk about directional antennas. These are all based on the Yagi model of antenna, and sometimes they're called quads because they have 4 elements, 4 gigantic elements, like this guy here on B, but they're mostly called Yagis. Okay. Here's another type of antennas. These are 10-meter antennas. They're dish parabolic antennas. Okay. And you can go crazy with this stuff. Okay. The higher up on the frequency you go, okay, the smaller the antenna is. That's why if any of you people have the dish network, okay, they stick a small parabolic antenna because you're up at the 10 gigahertz level. Okay, so you don't need a big gigantic antenna, and they're always pointed at a satellite segment. Okay, so when a satellite hits it, by the time it goes out of range, the next satellite is in your range for that antenna, and that's what makes the dish network possible. Okay, that's why dish network, if it snows or it gets incredibly cloudy or rainy, the performance deteriorates a little bit more. Okay. All right, cool. Practical feed lines, and this is the chart I was talking to you about, is they talk about different feed lines. Remember, a feed line is what goes between the radio and the antenna. The most popular, we only want 50 ohm. So the guys that we're interested in are these guys, RGA, RG8X, 58, okay, RG174, these guys are the ones we're interested in, okay? Now, some of these guys at the bottom of the chart here are impossible to work with. They're huge. They're huge. And you got to cut them the right way, and you have to have special connectors and special tools, and they weigh a ton, and you cut yourself, and they're just a disaster, okay? So, but on the plus side, there's very little signal loss, okay? So the bigger the pain in the butt it is, the less the signal loss. So again, it depends. If you live in Wisconsin, and I had a guy who I was so envious was in Wisconsin, and he has this ranch, and he's going to put up a tower, and the tower is like 700 feet from the house. Give me a break. I'd be in the next town at 700 feet. Anyway, and he was talking about he's going to run this LImarc 400 feed line. Well, that's for him. But most of us, don't have that much space. So depending on where you're going to put your antenna compared to where your radio is, that's how you make a decision on the cable. Okay, that's all that this means. No more than that. Okay. Any questions? No? Good. Connectors. All right, so this is where they get you. This is where they get you in amateur radio. Radio is not so expensive. The best antennas in the world you can probably build yourself better than any store-bought antenna. There's a million antenna designs on the web. You can build it out of anything, literally anything. 2 pieces of wire. Where they make their money is on the connectors. Every radio has its own connector. Every single one. And not only are the connectors here, but there's also different variations. So if we take an SMA connector, for example, which is the most popular, this guy here, all right? I know it's hard to see, but you can see it in your book. this is the most popular for handy talkies, right? Well, that's a male. They also make a female one. Which one do you need? Who knows? You have to buy 2 of them. That's this guy here, all right, this SMA. You need to buy 2 of them, a male and a female, and then you always buy the wrong one. And then you have to connect it to something else, okay? You have to connect it to your antenna, which has nothing to do with SMA. They look like these guys, PL250A connectors. So then you got to buy the adapter that goes from here to here. It's ridiculous. Anyway, you'd think that they would standardize it, but they don't, okay? Even the same manufacturer in different models of radios have different connectors. So you buy a Yaesu radio, you buy the 3X, that's different than the 6. The 6 is different than the 8, and that's where they get you, okay? So the really nice ones, you know, can cost you $10, $12 a piece, and you need about a gazillion of them. And the cheapy ones from China are only a couple of bucks, but they only work 50% of the time, okay? So the most popular, SMA for walkie-talkies, okay? And the most popular for non-walkie-talkies, the big ham radios, PL259. Okay? That's what that's about. All right, cool. And that's it. That's what they know. All right. Now, normally on your radio, what you do is you have your radio. Remember that we have a separate power supply. And we hook it up to an SWR meter to measure our SWR. And then when we do that, and we see that the SWR is like 14 to 1, what do we do? Okay, so I told you that we can address the SWR by shortening the antenna or lengthening the antenna, okay? And it depends on what frequency you're on, okay? So look at all these bands that I have here, right? Mm-hmm. So I can go from 160, I can go down to 70 centimeters. I don't show it, but I can. I can go to 1.2 gigahertz. So what do you think the chances are that every time I hit one of these buttons, I run out to my backyard and shorten my antenna or lengthen my antenna? What do you think that's, how many times do you think that happens? 0, okay?
It doesn't happen.
It's not happening, okay? And it's just, you know, I'll take up growing bonsai trees or something. You know, it's just not happening, okay? I have to climb, get the thing off of the tree, and then cut it, and then put it back there in the slingshot. Forget that. It's not happening, okay? Mm-hmm. So what they came up with was this thing called an antenna tuner, okay? Every radio in this house has an antenna tuner, okay? And what this does is using inductors, which store energy. How do inductors store energy?
Electrically.
Yeah? You sure?
Inductors.
Magnetic.
Oh, capacity. That's right.
Capacitors.
Okay. That's a question on the test, folks. Yep. Okay? So I'm being a really nice guy because I really like you guys. Okay? Come next week, I'm going to go down the list at 90 miles an hour. I'm going to say inductor, and you're going to give me the answer, and I'm going to say capacitor, and you're going to give me the answer. Right? And I'm going to ask you what the 2 functions of a transistor are, and you're going to know that, right? It's either switch or an amplifier. And I'm going to ask you which transistor is the only transistor to have a gate. And you're going to tell me field effect transistor, because in order to get to the field, you have to go through the gate. And you will know this upside down and backwards so that you will have completed 90% of the exam. I'll say 3 dB, and you'll say twice. All right? I'm just letting you know, just warning you, okay? That's coming. All right. Anyway, so I'm going to show you one next class. I have one that we'll use real time, and I've also taken one apart so you can see what one looks like. So inside here, there's a bunch of inductors and capacitors. And in the old days, you used to turn these little knobby things here where the little hand is, okay? Until you got a low SWR, and then you were good to go. Too much work. Too much work. So I got rid of all of these. As a matter of fact, the one that you're going to look at is one of my old ones, and now mine are completely automatic. You press a button, the SWR light lights up. It says that you have a good match, and off you go. Okay? There is no way I am lengthening or shortening an antenna. It ain't happening. Okay? It's just not happening. So we use these antenna tuners. These are also known as LC. L is in Larry, C is in Charles. Okay? Circuits. Okay? Because L is the abbreviation for inductors, and C is for capacitor. Okay? They're also called tank, T-A-N-K, like a tank, circuits. Okay? But basically, they're just tuners. So they lengthen or shorten the antenna electronically using capacitors, inductors, a couple of resistors, and you don't have to go and mess with the antenna. Okay? Because it changes. It changes all the time, depending on the frequency that you're on. Okay? And it makes it balanced. So the SWR is in balance with the radio. You're at 1.1 or 1.2 SWR. The impedance is perfect. And when all of that stuff comes together, we say that the antenna is resonant. Remember, I define resonant as right? Peace, zen, center your chi kind of thing. That's what resonance is, all right? Everything is cool. Go talk to your friend in Sweden or whatever you want to do, okay? All right, cool. And then the last part of this, SWR and watt meters. So these are antenna tuners, antenna matchers. They call them a bunch of different things, but all they basically do is tune the SWR for you. Okay? There's an antenna analyzer which you buy for an exorbitant amount of money. I think they're around $300 or $400. I happen to have a couple. I'll show them to you next time. You plug in your antenna over here. You don't plug in your radio. Just plug in your antenna, and it tells you what the SWR and the impedance and this little graph here, and it tells you at what frequency the antenna is resonant. So what that'll tell you is what frequency, without further modification, will this antenna work best with. Okay? Antenna tuners have become so efficient and so fantastic, you can get away with anything. So this is for the purist. This is for the guy who really wants the perfect job. They start off with a perfect antenna and the perfect radio so they can talk to their neighbor who literally lives across the street, or whatever, okay? I mean, that's what they want to do. But this will tell you where your antenna is resonant, okay? And I promise to have one for you on Tuesday. We'll play with all of these, okay?
But if you have a good tuner, you don't need the analyzer.
Nah, you don't. You don't. I'm the gadget guy, so I had to buy one, and I hooked it up. And because of the space limitations I have in my house, my antenna tuner, my analyzer said that my antenna was resonant at like 38 megahertz. Well, I can't transmit on 38 megahertz. It's not one of the privileges I have. What good is it? So I didn't do anything about it. I left the antenna alone. I bought the antenna tuner, hit the button, bingo, bango, done. Okay? But again, if you want to get into the science of antennas, especially if you get into Yagis and stuff like that, there you would use an antenna analyzer. Okay? All right, and I think we're done with this chapter. I have a question, okay? And we're going to kind of go down the list here. And the question was, I'm sure you all thought about it, is so a capacitor, right? A capacitor, by definition, stores electrical energy. That sounds like a battery. So my question was, is a battery a type of capacitor? Dana,
No.
you're on.
Yes,
DJ,
it
you're
is.
next. You say yes.
50-50 chance.
I like that answer. DJ, are you with us? We'll see if DJ comes on or he types me a message. Gloria, what do you say? Is it a capacitor or not?
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure. So if a capacitor, by definition, stores energy electrically, That's kind of like what a battery does, right? So is a battery a type of capacitor?
No.
Okay. Kenneth, what do you say? Yes or no? Is it a capacitor?
I'm going to say no because it stores it chemically.
Okay. Leslie, what do you say?
I say no as well.
Okay. Linda, what do you say?
No.
Lucas, what do you say?
No.
Okay. Patrick, what do you say?
No.
Rahul, what do you say?
No.
Ronald?
Definitely not. Not only does it store a battery that is stored chemically, but a capacitor is intended to give one large burst. Or so the internet says.
Okay. Shanu? Sean?
No, because
Okay.
we
Terry?
have to charge the capacitor first.
No.
Well, you have to charge batteries too.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, the rechargeable one, but the one that are non-rechargeable, they store chemically.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
but
either
the
way,
ones that are
it's a
not-
chemical reaction.
Yeah, but the ones that you don't recharge, at some point somebody had to put a charge into them. So what I'm saying is I don't want that to be the only criteria.
Yeah, okay.
All right? Okay, but you still say no, it's not, right?
No.
Okay. Terry, what do you say?
No.
Tom, what do you say? Yes or no?
No.
And Wassam, you said yes. I saw your text. Okay. All right, so the one who got it absolutely correct,
No.
actually you all got it correct for the most part, but the one who clearly identified the points was Ronald. Okay. So I think it was Kenneth. Who was the first guy? Kenneth, yeah, said that number one is a battery stores energy electrically. And that, I'm sorry, a battery stores energy chemically. And that's absolutely correct. Okay? That's how it stores it, is chemically. It's a chemical reaction. But Ronald went one step further. And that one step is a capacitor will store energy just like a battery does, but it can release it all in one shot. So boom, the energy's gone. Okay, the capacitor itself. Now you can put another circuit to take that energy, okay, and then feed it slowly, but the capacitor, by its own tendency, will want to discharge that charge almost immediately. Okay, so you all did exceedingly well. I'm very proud of you. Okay, you all got it right, so that was amazing. Okay, so we're going to call it a night. Chapter 5, 6, and we're going to try to do 7 all in one shot. They go pretty quick after this. And what I'd like you to do, please, is, and I'll send you an email, I want everybody to try to hit hamstudy.org. Okay? And you can start taking your exam, practice exams. If you haven't been on hamstudy.org, it's a really cool site. And I'll show you real quick what it looks like. You don't have to register if you don't want, but you should, and it doesn't cost you anything. The reason you should register is because it keeps track of what you don't do well in, and then it weights the exams to keep testing you on the stuff you didn't do well. So
The real test?
Yeah, these are all possible questions from the real test. Yeah, continue as guest, okay? And if you don't sign in, it doesn't keep track of where you are, okay? So here's, for example, what is part 15 device? Well, actually, let me back up one. We can do flashcards. Study flashcards, okay? And it's going to ask you a question. Oh, I learned a trick in this class. You hit Control and plus, and it makes it bigger. All right, cool. So what's the approximate amount of change measured in dB? Wow, we just discussed this. From 20 watts to 200 watts. So this is a 10-fold increase. So how many dB is that? Somebody
10.
tell me.
10.
That's it.
10.
Okay, cool. And if you don't understand how we got this, you just click on the corner. It flips over and gives you the explanation.
Oh, cool.
Okay? So you can go through that. And these are actual questions from the exam. So I'd like everybody to please take the time to go through this, because I expect you all to ace this stuff. And if you don't, and you're really confused about something, the last two classes, I'm going to focus on whatever I didn't explain correctly, so to clarify the issue. So you should take the test and be out of there acing it in less than 15 minutes. Okay?
Okay.
So that's the way it goes. All right, guys, have a great weekend. I am not going to be around this weekend, so if I don't answer your email, forgive me. It's our 42nd wedding anniversary. We're out of here for the weekend.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank
Joe.
you. Happy anniversary.
Yes.
Thank you. We 42 years and we never had a fight that I won. Okay, so that's the way that works. And I'm okay with that. There's no problem.
That way.
Yeah.
Joe, can I ask a question?
Sure, of course.
I had problems at the beginning hearing you, and
Right.
did I miss anything as far as missing a class earlier this week? Are you making it up with us?
So I canceled the class. I apologize. I had to
that's
work on a
okay.
project, and I just couldn't get out of it. I've never canceled the class before. This is just unfortunate that I had to.
Oh no, that's okay.
So you didn't miss anything on the class. And then the other question was that.
No, I just meant, are we going to have another one or not?
Oh yeah, we have another one Tuesday. So
but
we
I
still
mean,
have.
are we adding another one to make up for that or no?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
we'll
all I
add
want.
one at the end, and it's mostly review. So
Okay.
depending on how you feel, you may want to hang out or not hang out. And then immediately following this class, I'm going to give a quick rush class on general. I have a study sheet for the general as well. So if you want to take a shot at taking the general exam while you're taking your technician, it doesn't cost you anything, and your chances are pretty good that you'll pass the general as well.
Okay.
Could you email us out that sheet on the general?
I will as soon as we finish with one more chapter.
Okay.
The reason I don't do that is I don't want to confuse you.
Okay.
Okay, because it goes into more depth here, especially on this DB stuff. I have one other concept we need to discuss. This way I won't overwhelm you. I just don't want to overwhelm you.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you on Tuesday.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Happy anniversary.
All right. Thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.
See you, everybody.
Good night, Patrick.
Thank you.